Welcome. Today I'll be talking to you about Old English grammar and syntax. I ended the last lecture briefly talking about inflections and declensions and word order, and that might have been confusing, so that's okay. Some of the information in these lectures will serve as a clarification or refresher material to help you make sense of new concepts. So let's get started. I said that just about every word in Old English is inflected to demonstrate word meaning. But what does that actually mean? This can be hard for modern English speakers to grasp because our variety of English doesn't have many inflections. The primary inflections in modern English are changing a verb form to indicate appropriate tense or show when it was done. So for example, if I say, I ordered that book from Amazon, you know that to order is in the past tense, so I must have already completed the action. Inflections also apply to modern English when we need to convey that a noun, pronoun, or demonstrative is singular or plural. For example, if I say, I gave it to them, you know that I gave an object to more than one recipient, right? The pronoun is plural. This is basically what inflecting a word does. It gives us more information about that word. Whereas inflections today tell us when an action was completed and the number of something being discussed, Old English inflections tell us much more. Practically every Old English word was inflected. When nouns, pronouns, adjectives, and demonstratives are inflected, we say they were declined, okay? These word categories are declined to show person, number, gender, and case. In other words, first, second, third person, singular, plural, masculine, feminine, neuter, and grammatical case or word function. Okay? When verbs and adverbs are inflected, they are conjugated for person, number, gender, case, and tense and mood. And finally, all the words in a sentence must have accord or agree with one another. This is similar to modern day subject-verb agreement, except it applies to the whole sentence. So, okay, let's take a second. This is an awful lot to remember, and compared to our modern lack of inflections, this can be pretty overwhelming. I will not expect you to memorize the proper inflections for any word. So come midterm, I'll not ask you to tell me the third person plural declension of fox when it's the object of a sentence. I couldn't tell you that, right? This isn't an Old English class, so spending so much time learning inflections would be counterproductive to the mission of the class. Okay, just like with the explanation of Grimm's Law, I want you to understand how English has changed over time and be able to explain why it matters. Okay, so having established that, let's go into greater detail about how Old English words change when inflected. Let's start with nouns and adjectives. All nouns in Old English have a grammatical gender. This is similar to modern French and Spanish, in which all nouns are designated masculine or feminine. We know a word's gender because the article appearing before it is either masculine or feminine. Similarly, in Old English, we know a noun's gender because of how the words around it are declined. In the Old English system, to make matters more complicated, grammatical gender and natural gender may be at odds. For example, using translations, of course, children is neuter, wife is neuter, woman is masculine. Though they aren't declined for gender, they're declined based on number, person, and case. Okay? Adjectives are inflected or declined to correspond with the noun being modified because there must be agreement on the sentence level. So, if an adjective is modifying a masculine plural noun that is also a third person subject, the adjective will also be inflected to fit those parameters of masculine, plural, third person subject. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind before we move on, we are not working with one uniform language. We're working with actually several dialects, so I can't really give you a quick uniform example of some of these concepts, right? Different people were speaking different ways in different parts of the country. Okay, I'll remind you that charts demonstrating a variety of declensions are available in the media folder and in your textbooks, but again, you're not required to memorize them. Okay, so pronouns and demonstrative. With this in mind, let me just say that pronouns are inflected according to gender and number, similar to modern pronouns. Okay? He, she, it demonstrates gender for singular subjects, and they just tell us number. Okay? Modern English demonstratives indicate the number of nouns modified. For example, this book versus these books. Even without the S ending to pluralize the noun books, this and these tell us if the object is singular or plural. Okay. Singular demonstratives told us the gender and case of a noun modified. But plural demonstratives didn't indicate either gender or case. Okay, moving on. I know it's a lot, I'm so sorry. Verbs. So, verb conjugations are unfortunately even trickier because we have two categories, strong and weak verbs. I'm not going to go into too much detail here because I'm trying to just keep these lectures concise and accessible so you can just understand the basics, but these categories are really just the start. And then if we take dialect into consideration, it's just a handful. So let's keep this contained by talking about strong and weak verbs. There are fewer strong verbs, but they're used more frequently. Okay, strong verbs are comparable to modern English irregular verbs. They are conjugated by ablaut, which is the process of changing an internal part of the word rather than adding on a set ending. Okay, this is the difference between regular, weak, verb, walk, with past tense walked, and irregular strong verb swim with the past tense swam, right? So notice we have the change in the middle here, right? And that's what makes it strong. The four principal parts of a strong verb were the infinitive, first, third person, past, singular, second person past, and past participle. As a refresher, the principal parts of a verb are the forms of a verb from which all forms of the verb can be made. Okay, so those are strong verbs, okay? Weak verbs, then, they still agree with their subject in person and in number, just like strong verbs. The majority of Old English verbs are weak verbs, okay? Maybe as high as 75%, but usage and existence are not necessarily directly proportional. Okay, weak verbs only had three principal parts. All right, the infinitive, singular and plural past tense, and the past participle. Whereas strong verbs are conjugated by ablaut, by changing a letter within the word, weak verbs are conjugated by adding an affix. So, with strong and weak verbs, it's about the placement of the change in the word. Okay, moving on from verbs. Let's talk about syntax or word order. So because inflections communicated a lot of information listeners or readers needed to know in Old English, okay, this meant that meaning could be instructed or constructed in a number of different ways, and that word order isn't necessarily as fixed as it is today, right? And that's, I think, one of the biggest changes for me to kind of wrap my mind around. Analytic languages like modern English, so what we speak, do not communicate as much through the few word inflections we have. So we rely on an established standard word order, which we all know. Okay, typically it's this, right? Subject, verb, object. That is our word order. Old English, on the other hand, could actually omit subjects if the context was obvious from the other words in a sentence. So at the bottom of this slide are some possible word orders that Old English would have used with examples, but these are certainly not the only ones available. I do, however, want to draw your attention to this final example here. Okay, you see that a negative construction has its own suggested word order, which may be surprising to us. It wasn't uncommon to see multiple negation in Old English through Middle English, and so more than one negative could appear in a single sentence. Okay, deep breath. Hope you're still with me. All right, grammatical case. This is the part that is dense and challenging, but we'll have some variety in upcoming lectures to balance all the grammar talk. Okay, so you may have noticed that I didn't explain exactly what grammatical case is. I mentioned it briefly. It's the function a word performs in a sentence, but that's vague. So here's a better definition. Okay. Case is a grammatical category for any non-verb content word, and it reflects the word's function. So, again, nouns, pronouns, adjectives can all be declined to demonstrate person, number, gender, and case. Okay? Nouns, pronouns, and noun modifiers could take 5 cases in Old English: nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, and instrumental. And I'm going to briefly go through this. Nominative was used when the noun or noun phrase was the subject or the person/thing performing an action. So nominative case was also used for direct address. Genitive case is used when the noun phrase is the possessor of an object. It's essentially modern day possessive case. Okay. Dative case is used when the noun phrase is the indirect object and after preposition. So just as indirect objects are used today, several verbs also took direct objects in the dative case. Accusative is when the noun phrase is the direct object. Accusative case is never distinguished in the plural or in a neuter noun, but the earliest textual Old English records show that the accusative and nominative cases were merging really early. And then instrumental case is used when the noun phrase is the means by which something is done, right? In other words, if the noun is the means, manner, cause, and or accompaniment by which something happens, we use the instrumental case. Okay, good gosh. That was a lot. Here's what I want you to take from this lecture. First, Old English expresses word roll primarily by inflection, whereas modern English inverts this strategy. Word order is not, or it's really just incidental in Old English. It's not as important as it is to us today. 2. A grammatical case may be used for a number of unrelated functions, or the same function may apply to more than one case. And 3. Synthetic languages are not inherently more difficult than analytic languages. Okay? This is a lot to grapple. I know it's a lot to grapple with. Because you're learning the principles of a language that is no longer spoken, so you can't really get practical experience with it. Old English, in fact, is typically taught as a foreign language to modern speakers, so you can see why. Essentially, I just want you to understand the principles and significance of inflected language. How does it work? what can we learn from it? Take a deep breath. I'm done. I will see you guys later. Listen to this more than once if you have to. Have a good day.